Welcome to Belief, Being, and Beyond with your host, Granddaughter Crow. Hi, everybody. Granddaughter Crow here with yet another episode of Belief, Being, and Beyond. And I brought someone back to the show because they have a fantabulous new book out. I think we might have mentioned it, but here it is in the flesh. I guess the book is in the flesh. It is celebrating sensitives, and I have with me Dr. Reverend Laura Palmer, PhD. Say hello to everyone, Laura.
Hi, everybody. It's an honor
Oh,
to be here.
oh, thank you. Let me give you guys a little bit more background around Laura, Dr. Reverend Laura Palmer. So graduated from the University of Sedona with a PhD in holistic life counseling and a Reiki master teacher. That's some good energy. That is some good energy. She specializes in counseling highly sensitive people, which I am and she is, and I love highly sensitive people. She loves supporting highly sensitive people or HSPs however she can. She does live in the foothills of Colorado, so she's right up the road from me. Okay, maybe right up the hill from me. And also, so she lives west of Denver with her mom and her rescue dog, Sophie. Also, Dr. Laura Palmer is a highly sensitive person herself and has spent a better part of the last decade learning, experimenting, practicing all things metaphysical, and combining her two great interests history, which she's a history buff, and highly sensitive people. And this is what she brings to us is this book. If you want to read more and connect with Dr. Reverend Laura Palmer, you can reach her at www.sacredscienceenergy.com, and I will drop that in the notes. But today we get to talk all things sensitive. And I love talking all things sensitive with you, Laura, because you do the research. You don't just go, well, I feel like this, so it must be true. You do all the research. And so for the listeners, define highly sensitive person just really briefly in case they don't know.
Briefly, um,
Just buy
basically,
the book, people,
yeah,
buy the book.
just, I guess the crux of the character trait, which that's actually what I love about it, is it's a character trait. It's not a good thing, bad thing. It just is, and I love the fact that we see it throughout all cultures and all history points, and we see it all over the place. But the crux of it really is the fact that we are sensitive to we are what is it we are sensitive to the subtle energies of our environment,
Oh, yeah.
right? And everything, Elaine Aaron, and you taught this to me, Granddaughter Crow, was that acronym of DOES, right? The deep processing, overstimulation, emotional, and sensitive to the subtle energies. But if you kind of think about it and you reverse it, you can see how the oversensitization and the emotions and the deep processing all stems from being able to read the room, being sensitive to those environments. So, in my opinion and in my experience, that's really the key that makes us a little different.
I love that. And it is very, very true. So does. I love that. Depth of processing, overstimulation, emotional, and sensitive to the subtleties of the environment. So celebrating sensitives, this is interesting book that took a long time to research and put together. And I really want to, without further ado, I want to jump in. It is Celebrating Sensitives, what we can learn from historical sensitive persons and how they are and how to be empowered like they were. And so, like, your book is broken out into like 3 points or 3 parts. The first one talks in depth about what is a sensitive, and it goes into that does acronym that you just spoke of, and it does all this research, and it explains and gives examples, and it goes on so that by the time you're done with part one, you got a pretty good handle on the traits. And I love to, because I think at first, when Dr. Elaine Aron coined the phrase highly sensitive person, that they were kind of like, is this a condition or is it a personality trait? And only to find out it's not like a condition, it's not a disorder, it's a trait. We were born like this. And the first part is really packed full of that. So, and it's really good review for those who have been studying being an empath. The beauty around this book is what you bring, which is the history, showing us throughout history different historical figures that land in these categories based on the traits and what they did, and also based on, their lived experience, their history, their personal experience, as well as your perception of them. And I love how you break it out. So, like, you have a part where it talks about where I would actually see religious figures and artists. That's almost like a no-brainer for me, that highly sensitive people are going to be religious figures and artists. But then you go into the inventors and you go into the leaders, because a lot of times we think, oh, they're too sensitive to be a leader. Oh, no, not necessarily. Right? And then we'll dig into the less than loving,
Yeah.
highly sensitive. So, how did you go about the process? Just really, how did Laura Palmer wake up in the morning and go, I'm going to write a book based on the two loves of what I love to think about, history and highly sensitive? How did that come about? Was it just a eureka, or how did it happen?
Kind of, actually, it was a combination. It was COVID, and as a history buff, with all this kind of new open time, I started watching even more historical documentaries and even more. And I think it was Abraham Lincoln that I was watching a documentary on, probably one of Ken Burns' um, pieces. And I went outside and I started walking around, and I'm like, you know what? Abraham Lincoln surprisingly had a lot of character traits that matched up with the HSP. And I'm like, well, duh, it's not like, HSPs were born the minute that Elaine Aron published this book, right? I
Hey,
was like, well, we've been around for a long time. And so
just
that's what I started to kind of research it more and more. And I did get the inkling. So for a while now, I've been kind of searching my soul and things to find a subject to write a book about, but everything felt derivative and not worthy of killing trees.
mm,
This idea of combining the two and kind of explaining and potentially even extrapolating out that character trait even further really felt tree killing worthy. And they all agreed with me. They were like, yes, you may. So that's how I actually got into the PhD program, because knowing myself, I knew that I wanted to do this, but I also knew that if I didn't have a reason to, or something to really push me, some kind of accountability, that I would just drop it, like several other projects I've got in my closet. And so I checked with my advisor before I signed up, and I said, "This is going to be my doctorate. This is going to be my dissertation. Which program will get me the ability to do that?" And so that's pretty much how we went on. And then about 4 years later, we got it done.
love it. Talk about begin with the end in mind. I think that Stephen Covey said that. Begin with the end in mind. And most people who have a doctorate That's very difficult to figure out what you want your dissertation to be about. And you were just like, I want my dissertation to be about this. Let me go ahead and get a doctorate and sign up for a program that allows it to be so. I love it. Build it backwards. I love it. I also really enjoy this because you make a good point in that when Dr. Elaine Aron wrote this book, when did she write it? Like 1986 or 92?
96
96. Okay,
was the first year published.
was the first year published. And she coined the phrase earlier HSP, highly sensitive person, but we didn't just start being born when she coined the phrase. We were here without not an identity, but a category. Like,
Right. And a lot of us, you can see where, like, even um, a lot of characters in literature, you can see where that sensitive, historically, we were the nervous type, we were the artistic temperament, we were the ones that had the nervous tics or whatever. But when you actually look at it in a different way, you start to see like, oh, I mean, this is just start popping up all throughout history. And I actually only, I focus, the ones that are in the book, I focused on because there is so much rich information about them.
right.
Right. And so I could get those childhood stories. I could get the little quirks and all of those wonderful things. There are others that I have a suspicion were such as Nero and potentially Caligula, but we don't have the records and I can't find the stories or the proof to back that up. So we really kind of, unfortunately, the historical documents start to get really good around the 15th or 17th century, 1600s. So it focuses on the ones before, but we still got them everywhere.
Love it. I absolutely love it. Can you give us, like, choose one of them that you wrote about and give us a little bit, like, more of, like, what was it? Like, religion. We already know that one, but the inventors,
Mhm.
like, give us a little bit more information about that. Like, choose one of the inventors.
Okay. One of my favorite inventors is Tesla, Nikola Tesla. Not the car, not the company of today, right? But we're talking about the man. One of the things that inventors, when you start to think about it, um, we know that Elaine Aron actually did a study with fMRIs, right, the functional MRIs, and discovered that the neural pathways of a sensitive are different than a non-sensitive. Um, as a result, that means we think differently. We think out of the box. And with that in mind, inventors become a natural umbrella, a natural category for that. And Tesla is a perfect example of that. We know that he was some OCD is probably an easy, kind way to describe him. In the book, we document how some woman at a party was wearing pearl earrings, and it just drove him to madness. There was one point, actually, it was really interesting. About 18 months before Tesla had his very first breakthrough with his invention, and I can't remember the invention, but he had a major nervous breakdown. His nerves became so overstimulated that he had to put padding under the feet of his bed because the traffic going by the front of the building would just set him on edge. He could hear a pocket watch ticking across the hall 3 doors down.
Yeah, that's highly sensitive, right?
Right. And of course, we didn't have any techniques then. His best known technique was spending time in nature, which we find a lot of these. That's a big recurring pattern for many of them is to just go walk around in nature. But Tesla, I find it very interesting that he had this breakdown um, mere months before he had a breakthrough,
Wow.
which is very telling for humanity and for sensitives.
I love that. I absolutely love that. So I broke down about 6 months ago, so maybe I'll have a breakthrough coming up here in a little bit. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I love that. Okay, so here's another question for you. What drove the different groups? Like I said, you have the religious figures and artists, you have the inventors and all of that. You also have leaders, and then you have the less than lovable, highly sensitive people, which we will get to because I love that. How did you categorize that? How did they finally find their category?
I really kind of fell into place actually, just as I was kind of going, ooh, what about this one? Ooh, what about this one? Ooh. And it was really my ultimate goal was to get to those leaders. I wanted to show the example that sensitives make great leaders. The intuition, the empathy, the highly intelligent, so that we can strategize and think out of the box. Those all are qualities of beautiful, wonderful leaders. But I felt like I had to kind of walk us up to the concept of that. And
Yes.
so we started with the softball of the religious and the artistic, and then the inventors, which is a little bit out of the box, and then the leaders, so that once we did get completely out of the box, it wasn't so crazy.
I love that because it's true. I mean, especially in what I would say the left hemisphere centric, meaning our brain is very logical. It's centered around logic in the United States in 2025 and has been in the United States for a while. And so this idea of being sensitive, it really is like, but that's different than logic because, isn't this person who's like highly sensitive, depth of processing and stimulation, overstimulation and emotion, how could they rise to be a leader? And I think that you being able to show us what that looks like, not only explain it, because like you just did, they are going to have that empathy, they are going to have that depth of processing, they are going to have that intuition to go something, that gut check or whatever,
Mhm.
and yet they rise to leadership. And then you give us prime examples. Could you give us one of those examples of one that just pops into your mind, one of the leaders?
There's several that want to
Okay,
talk.
let's
um,
go for it.
we always love Eleanor Roosevelt. She's one of our favorites,
Yeah.
because she was the mother of the country through the Depression and World War II, and she still maintained. What I love about her is a lot of, at the time, people just gravitated. She was like a warm comfort blanket. She was like a cozy blanket of comfort during some of the really tough times of the 20th century for America. And I love what sealed the deal for me, was that Eleanor Roosevelt had a meditation room in the White House, and was very adamant that when they were developing and planning the United Nations, that they have a meditation prayer room, quiet room.
I love that.
And
Wow.
I love her. Yeah, she's one of my absolute. She's a strong one for me.
I love that. That's such a, I mean,
And we were able to track down her meditative process, and it is in the book.
for you guys, let's all meditate like Eleanor Roosevelt. Let's do it. Let's do it. I absolutely love that because meditation for me, I practice it off and on throughout my life, but I'm into it right now and have been into it for the last well, since the beginning of February. So, and we're recording this and at the end of April for the last 3 months, and I'm going to continue this process of meditation and where it takes me, and there's all different forms and stuff, but where it takes me is to my inner stillness so I can hear my voice. And practicing it and doing a daily practice of that helps me to return to that daily voice very, very quickly and I don't get lost. And so the fact that the leader and a female, first lady, all of it is like, wow. Yeah, she's one of my favorite too. Who else? Who else is, you said a few want to come forward, so pick another one.
Well, it's easy now to understand how Abraham Lincoln was a sensitive,
Right.
right? Now that we kind of are a little more familiar with the character trait, we can see, oh yes, of course. What I love most about him is that we can see the arc of his character go from he was always an abolitionist, right? But there are new documents that are coming out that says, okay, he does believe that all men should be free, but he also believes that there are only certain people that should be jurors and government leaders. And we see this arc, he grows, and he changes and he modifies and he opens up and he changes the country and he changes our world. And it's fun to see that kind of soul growth um, in somebody and to watch it, read back, and really enjoy it.
Yeah. That's amazing. And that brings up another point of that as a sensitive, our souls continue to grow. And another thing, because I'm about ready to shift into the less lovable ones. But what I love about this is that it complements any sensitive collection or library, if you will,
Mhm.
because it actually goes back and reviews very well-known historical figures and shows us what it was like before and what tools they had to create for themselves because they didn't have a Dr. Reverend Laura Palmer telling them, oh, walk outside into the natural world and you'll feel a little better. They had to figure all of that out by themselves. And that it also speaks to like sometimes when people find a title or a label and they identify with it, like I'm a highly sensitive person, that doesn't mean that I am introverted, hermit, need to behave like this. And I probably have, maybe I'm going to have OCD in the future. It's that there are all shapes and sizes and colors of different how we work with this tool, this character trait of being highly sensitive. And we get to see examples of that. I mean, so for me, you kind of broaden the scope where it's not like, oh, we're all church mice. Oh, no, we're not.
Mm-mm, mm-mm.
Did you
No,
get surprised at all did you get surprised at all as you were going through that you kind of found some and you're just like, that makes sense, but I wouldn't have thought.
I was surprised and not surprised
Yeah.
to find so many HSPs as American founding fathers.
That's
They're coming. It's a piece that I'm working on an Oracle deck right now, and so they're going to be in that one. So they're not in this one, I don't think. But many of our founding fathers were HSPs,
wow.
which I'm like, thank you. Can you come back and help us again?
It actually makes a lot of sense because I think I think you brought this information to me. There was a study that Dr. Elaine Aron's friends, she had biology friends, and they also did a study on over 100 other species and found out that there was the normal like 15-20% of those populations that also held these traits. And so then they believe, the biologists think that, well, they're here for the survival of the population because they are sensitive towards new stimuli within the environment.
Mhm. We're famous for being both either early adopters like Lincoln. He was one of the reasons him winning the presidency was an absolute surprise. Him getting the nomination was he just came out of nowhere at the convention. But his candidacy, his campaign was, and throughout his entire presidency was all because he capitalized on new technology. He was an early adopter of the newspapers and the telegraph. So he could clearly communicate and say, nope, that's not what my speech said. This is what it said. So he was able to do that. So part of us are early adopters. We get excited. We like new toys. We play with them. But the opposite of that is also true where we're wait and seers, right?
Yeah.
We're kind of like, okay, so there's this new technology, this new wrangled thing called the satellite, and we're just going to wait and see how it happens, and how it develops. And so it's that wait and see that really kind of does help the species. We're like, okay, I know this is cool and this is nifty and everything, but let's just kind of rein it back a little bit and just see how it flows and where it goes
Yeah.
before we go all hog wild. So, but I love the fact that it's been postulated that every species on this planet is 20% of us are HSPs. And I see it in dogs, I see it in cats, I see it in a lot of the domesticated. And it's just thrilling to consider that our planet is a sensitive one.
Yeah. And it also is really interesting because I think back in the day, in at least the business world, when Dr. Lynn Aaron was bringing this book out, we were just then going in with like Daniel Goldman and emotional intelligence and all of these books kind of bringing to the forefront of the business world that, emotions are good, people. We're not on, on the line with a number in building a Ford, T-model Ford, we are literally individuals. And so this idea is starting to come out and it's still shaping. And then you take us into this understanding, oh yeah, and they were always here. Let's take a look. So here's a question for you. I do enjoy the part where you say the less than lovable or likable highly sensitives, and you actually put a precursor in that chapter where you're just like, if this gets your gut wrong, skip it, you know? Because the idea, I think that as a highly sensitive person, it makes me feel like, oh, well, I'm special and I'm good and I can do no wrong. I have these gifts. I might be clairvoyant. I have good intuition. So, how could a person with those gifts go to the dark side? But it happens, people. Look at Darth Vader. Look at Darth Vader. I don't think Darth Vader is in the book, but he could have been a highly sensitive. No, I'm just playing. So the idea, I think that you are introducing for the first time that I've ever seen it, the idea that, yeah, you are gifted, but what you do with your gifts really matter. So why did you write that chapter and what did you find and give us an example?
I really did find that um, it's straight up a character trait. It is neither good nor is it bad, and it is completely on you and your soul and your responsibility as to what you do with that gift. We do carry a lot of energy and power, and with that comes a lot of responsibility. So we need to be very aware of of and I think sensitives already are. Sometimes we become paralyzed by, oh, is this going to be okay? But some of us, the ego gets in the way. And so it's really a matter of balance and noticing that this is a trait, just like me having brown gray hair and hazel brown boring eyes. It's the same kind of thing. Somebody has blue eyes, what are they going to do with it? I've got pink eyes, what am I going to do with that? So along with there's a great it was a Netflix short-lived series about with Kathy Bates, where somebody was doing a podcast, and it was a couple, and she was like, "Wow, you're so psychic, you're so intuitive," and he's like, "Yeah, it's a gift, it's a curse, it's a curse," and I'm like, "Yeah."
Verse.
Right. And it truly, it can be either way. It's a matter of how you choose to accept it, if you do, and a matter of what to do with it and how you do it.
Yeah.
um, I'm not going to say the obvious one as
Okay. We'll
because,
save it for the book. If you guys want to know the obvious one, you got to pick up the book. Where can they, really quick, where can people get your book? Just
well, it's
anywhere.
available in my publishers. It's Sunbury Press. It's available on Amazon. It's a free Kindle download, actually. If you have issues with eyesight or something like that, the Kindle is an option. It's on a lot of thrift books, Abe Books, those kind of places, and some local bookstores in the Denver metro area.
Absolutely. And basically, I'm pretty sure that if you walk into your favorite bookstore, buy local, and ask them to order this book, just ask them, say, I would like to buy Celebrating Sensitive by Dr. Reverend Laura Palmer, please. This is what it looks like. And then you will be off to the races and be able to find out who she's talking about when she says the obvious one. So go ahead and give us a less than obvious bad guy, quote unquote bad guy, or less lovable, one who
Right.
chose their Gerst to be the curse. Yeah.
Right. I usually, well, yeah, let's go. Ooh, Machiavelli.
Okay.
Okay, so we're somewhat familiar with it. The person has kind of been lost through the work. We now consider many cutthroat strategies or actions to be Machiavellian, or
Right.
somebody to have a Machiavellian personality. The book I found, because like I said, there's a lot of information on him, and it's she postulates that Machiavelli wrote The Prince, which is the book that his theories are based on, as a satire
Oops.
and as a handbook for sure how to succeed in without really trying, but also eventually you will fail.
Oh,
And
wow.
you can start to see with that in mind, the other Machiavelli wrote more than just The Prince. He wrote plays, he wrote songs, he wrote humor. He had a great sense of humor. And he's my one thing from him that I have worked with, and it took me a while to find this from him, find this energy. He was an observer
Oh, an observer.
and potentially clairaudient. Actually, I almost know clairaudient. Um, there's a story in one of the sources that I found where it was a combination, there was a conversation between two people, and I've forgotten the names. I think it's a cardinal um, and a Borgia, and cardinal and Borgia. And Machiavelli was present at the conversation, and he literally reports that he stepped back from the conversation, so he wasn't involved in the conversation, and he consciously remembered every single word so that he could faithfully and authentically report the conversation back to the leaders in Florence. And
Wow.
I'm like, well, there you go.
Wow.
So he's a really good one to work with the observer. He's also one that work with where um, getting the clear message out. He wrote, if this author is indeed true fact, and he did write in satire. We need to make that a little bit more clear the next time.
Right? Oopsies. That's what I was like. Big oops.
Yeah, yeah. But another one of my favorite less than lovings is Stalin, actually.
Okay.
Um, he when you consider that the idea he was right there at the beginning of the Communist Manifesto and the whole idea of equal work and everyone should share, right? Equality and all of that. And so we can see this sweet loving. He loved to write poetry. His poems were published in a local newspaper. He was a choir boy. He was an award-winning singer for his choir and was on his way to become a priest. And so he got involved with the New Thought and all of the boys there and started working more for socialism and communism. And so he kind of got derailed from the priesthood. But you can see where philosophically there's not much difference really, with a couple of major minor differences. But it's really the most telling story that I found about Stalin was he was at the gravesite of his first wife. And he was burying his wife. And he was so overcome with emotion that he said, "This is where my empathy for humanity ends." And that's when we start to see him take a turn. And that's when we start seeing him, the ego takes over. And that's when he becomes the man that we know him for.
Whoa.
Chilling, right?
My eyes are watering and I'm speechless.
I know. Yeah, Herbert Hoover, another one in the book, did basically the same thing, cut off his emotions, but his was the death of his dog, Speedy
Mm,
Bozo. But he was like, nope, this is too much. I'm stepping out of the emotional arena, and I'll just go Machiavellian and do what I got to do, and the end justifies the means. So it's
wow.
fascinating.
That is, and I mean, these are big, like we all know these people and research these people, but it also on that macro level, but it also shows on a micro level, like if you follow my personal story, I was very, very sensitive, and then I got ousted by my family. They kicked me out, and the church kicked me out because I questioned God. And I kind of did a similar thing. I didn't like say this is where it ends, but I was just like, I am going to like, let's see what this, I'm going to go to school. I'm going to work my way up in the corporate America. It's a dog eat dog world. The end justifies the means. And I was I was a really good cold person when I was in that role. I didn't know it, except for, like if I was interviewing a new vendor or something like that. After a while, I'd get to know them and they would be like, "You are intimidating as F." And I'm like, "What are you talking about? I feel nice in the inside." No. So it's a really strange thing and then thankfully I came back, and swung back around. It took a couple of hits over, spiritual hits in order for me to reawaken, but I did. And so that is a part of a sensitive story too. That, we say that it's a curse, but because we feel so deeply, it's not that I don't think that they could turn it off. I just think that they were like, fine, this is the world. I'm living in a cold world. And I think that being an empath really does feel like being a mirror. And you can mirror positivity as much as you can mirror like the
The other
other
side.
the other side. I hate to say it, but I've done it.
Yep.
I've done it, and it kind of it makes these people a little bit more human, but it also helps me to look at my life and open up my mind to some of those times probably were me as a highly sensitive being so hurt and crushed. I mean, seriously, when my family kicked me out and the church kicked me out, I was suicidal. I was suicidal at the age of 17, and it took me, I had to shut it all down and go, that was all hogwash.
Mhm.
That was all hogwash, and then move forward. And it took me what, a good 17th, fourth, I don't know, 10 plus 7 plus a good 17 years to heal
Yeah.
before I was ready to open back up. And I did open back up about 20 some odd years ago, and now I'm here. But that's also a really good thing to look for that I never heard of, Laura.
Right.
I mean, Dr. Reverend Laura Palmer. I know her as Laura, so I take advantage of that.
Laura's good too.
Yeah,
I like
no,
that.
I love it. I love it. You could call me Crow. I'll call you Laura. I love it. But that you really did do a lot of work with this book because as a sensitive, you had to have come into it with a little bit of bias and then to look at these people and go, no way, and put your bias aside and actually look at the traits and everything was the doctoral aspect of
Right.
it.
Right.
I love it.
Yeah, we actually in the beginning, it might be part one or somewhere in there, we actually apologize if we have overstepped and our zeal to make our case misrepresented anybody, but we just love sensitive so much that we see them everywhere.
Pretty
Uh,
sure that was the intro, Laura. I think that was literally, maybe you say it a couple of times, but it really is, hey, by the way, I love you guys, but let's go ahead and sit down and look at the beauty around life without labeling it as good or evil in our own human world because of, certain things. I don't want to be known historically. Well, I do want to be known historically, but I don't want to be known for the bad stuff that I've done, Laura. I don't
right.
want to.
I
I
know.
want to be known for this podcast. I want to be known for knowing people like you. I want to be known for that, and so it's kind of like it all matters. So what is in your future? I know that we are putting this out at the beginning of May, and you and I have a book signing that we're going to be doing. I have to give a shout out to people who see this and are going to be in the Denver metro area or traveling through Colorado this coming weekend on Sunday, May 4th from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock, in-person book signing. Plus, we're just going to have a lot of chat. Dr. Reverend Laura Palmer and Granddaughter Crow are going to be sitting in the same room talking to and answering questions. So if you guys can, please, please, please show up. If you can't, you're talking about other things that you're doing. You said a deck of cards. How's that going? I think you might have mentioned that last time too. We're keeping track. This is your accountability. This is your accountability. Believing and Beyond is Dr. Reverend Laura Palmer's accountability for her projects. So, yeah, tell us, how's that going and what is
um,
it about?
the first 44 card deck is written. And just this morning, we started on the second 44 card deck. And they're split as you into left brained and right brained. So the expected HSPs and the non-expected. And we haven't worked out the terms for that yet, but we have an artist on board, and she's chomping at the bit to get those images for the deck ready and going. But I have her very busy on a children's book.
What? I want to hear more of this. What is this?
So in the book, on page 4, I think, is a poem, and it's called The Weird Kids. And this was actually the very first thing that I kind of channel wrote. And I always saw it as being a children's book. To me, growing up sensitive and not knowing about it was the hardest, most, just, right? And so I wanted to write a letter to the sensitive kids of today and tomorrow. And that's what this poem is. And my friend and illustrator is turning it into a children's book so we can have it out, so they can all find out that they are good, that they are wonderfully crazy and beautifully inventive, and can be very strong and impactful leaders.
Wow. I love that. Again, www.sacredscienceenergy.com. Reach out to Laura. Is there anything else that you offer on your website that you would like to invite people to discover? Do you do one-on-ones, or what are you up to on your website?
We do remotes, and
Okay, cool.
actually, one of the fun things that we've started working a lot with about, I've forgotten what month it is, about a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. We've been working with fairy energy,
Nice.
and that fairy energy is really nice on a remote level. It's actually a lot more powerful. Um, Clients across the world, multi continents, have been able to feel the energy, and it's actually potentially more effective than in person. We do in persons in our office, but that distance remote Reiki with the fairies is a whole lot of fun.
I love it. We might have to have you back on the show talking about the fae and the fairies and all of that. I think that that would be lovely. So thank you so much for taking the time. You guys, please take a look at this book. Like I said, if you have a library or a bookshelf full of HSP empathic books, this one is a must because it expands the mind to reach back to what it could look like in history. It expands the mind to think that we are leaders, not just all psychics. It expands the mind, and artists, it expands the mind to understand that we too can go awry, you know? But anyway, Laura, thank you for being on the show.
Thank
I
you for having me.
Absolutely. And thank you guys for listening to yet another episode of Belief Being and Beyond. Like, subscribe, share. This one is a really empowering one. Even if you have been 50 years in your craft, this is going to expand your mind. This is new information collected by a historian as well as a doctoral person who researches and works with highly sensitive people. And until next time, I love you. See you on the flippity flip.